So what if our biggest, most dominant social and economic systems, the ones we think of as complete opposites, were actually built on the exact same flawed foundation? Today, we're going to dive into a pretty comprehensive philosophy that not only points out this flaw, but offers a really radical blueprint for a whole new world. It's called PROUT, which stands for the Progressive Utilization Theory.
And this is the statement that really kicks everything off. It's provocative, right? The idea that capitalism and communism are basically two sides of the same coin. So what's that common thread holding them together? Well, according to this philosophy, it all comes down to one word: exploitation.
Before you can fix a problem, you have to get a really clear diagnosis of what's wrong. And that's exactly where PROUT begins. It starts with a critical and honestly a pretty sweeping look at our world, and it identifies exploitation as a kind of fundamental disease in our systems. Okay, so let's break this down. The argument goes that in capitalism, the nonstop chase for profit ends up concentrating all the wealth in the hands of just a few, and that is a form of exploitation. But then it turns around and looks at communism, describing it as a kind of state capitalism, where the state itself is the ultimate exploiter. In that system, people's inner, psychic, and spiritual drives are crushed by an elite party that holds on to power through repression. So you see, both are seen as engines of exploitation. They just have different people in the driver's seat.
And this critique doesn't just stop at economics. Nope, the theory sees these same exploitative patterns absolutely everywhere. In dogmatic religions that, shut down free thinking. In all the isms, like nationalism, that slice up humanity into artificial groups. Even in education and the justice system, which are seen as tools for control instead of for helping people grow. It paints a picture of a society where human value has just gotten lost in the shuffle.
So, if exploitation is this pervasive, why does it keep happening over and over again? Well, PROUT puts forward this really unique model of history to explain it. It's called the social cycle. And the idea here is that societies don't just move forward in a straight line. They move in a predictable, repeating pattern.
And this cycle has 4 very distinct ages, each one dominated by a particular kind of class with its own mindset. It kicks off with the Shudra age, the age of laborers. Then that's followed by the Kshatriya age, which is ruled by warriors who use their strength to create order. After them, you get the Vipra age, led by intellectuals and priests who use ideas to shape society. And then finally, we get to the Vaishya age, the age of merchants and capitalists, all driven by collecting wealth.
And this is the key to how history moves. According to the theory, every single one of these ruling classes, whether they're warriors, priests, or capitalists, eventually starts to use their power for their own gain. They become the exploiters, and that exploitation builds up pressure until bam, you get a revolution that pushes society into the next phase. It's presented as this natural, though often painful, rotation of history.
All right, so if history is just one big cycle of exploitation, how in the world do you break it? This is where we shift from the problem to the solution. This is where the philosophy gets its name, PROUT. It's a very specific blueprint designed to get us off this merry-go-round.
So PROUT stands for Progressive Utilization Theory. And its goal is, well, it's simple to say, but absolutely massive in scale. It's about using all the resources we have, physical, mental, and spiritual, in the most rational and efficient way possible, but not for the profit of a few, for the all-round elevation of humanity. The key phrases to remember here are maximum utilization and rational distribution.
So what does that actually look like in practice? Well, the theory lays out a vision for a balanced, self-sufficient economy. Ideally, you'd have about 30 to 40% of people working in agriculture. Another 40% would be in industries that support farming or process its goods. And that leaves the last 20% for commerce and other services. The whole point of a structure like this is to create stability, so you're not dangerously over-reliant on just one sector.
And the core economic principles here are, well, they're pretty revolutionary. First off, a constitutional guarantee of the minimum necessities of life for every single person. We're talking food, shelter, clothes, education, and medical care. How? By focusing on increasing the purchasing power of every single individual. And the economy wouldn't be run from the top down. It would be decentralized, with planning starting right at the local level. The main engine for all this would be cooperatives, putting economic power right back into the hands of the people doing the work.
Now, a blueprint is one thing, but a plan is just a piece of paper without someone to actually build it, right? So who makes this all a reality? The philosophy says a special kind of leader is needed to guide society out of this cycle of exploitation, and these leaders have a name: Sadvipras.
So, who exactly are these Sadvipras? The sources define them as people who are not only spiritually advanced and completely uncompromising on their morals, but who are also fiercely dedicated to fighting exploitation in all its forms. They're imagined as standing right at the center, the very nucleus of society, guiding its direction.
To pull this off, a Sadvipra is said to need this unique blend of 3 core traits. The first one is a deep spiritual grounding. Their motivation isn't supposed to be selfish. It comes from a universal outlook that sees the well-being of everyone as their own personal duty.
Second, they have to be intellectually sharp, really powerful thinkers. This means they can understand the deep complexities of society and economics, which allows them to guide progress without getting fooled by dogma or bad ideas.
And finally, they are described as brave. The texts are very clear on this point. When exploitation gets a stranglehold on society, Sadvipras must have the courage to fight back, even using force if that's what it takes, to protect people and keep society moving forward.
And that brings us to their real job, their ultimate function. Sadvipras don't actually try to stop the social cycle, they accelerate it. Whenever one of the ages gets bogged down in exploitation, they're supposed to step in and spark a revolution to push society forward and stop people from suffering for too long. They're basically the vigilant guardians of social evolution.
So underneath this entire economic and social structure, there's a really profound philosophical foundation. It's a worldview that asks us to expand our sense of who's in our family way beyond our city or our nation or even just our own species. And it's called neo-humanism.
Neo-humanism is basically about taking that spirit of humanism, that love for humanity, and just stretching it, expanding it to include all beings in the universe, animals, plants, the whole planet. It's about making a conscious choice to move away from selfishness and groupthink toward what the texts call a sentiment of cosmic fraternity. And this quote just sums it all up so powerfully, doesn't it? It's a call to look right past all the superficial differences that divide us. Nation, religion, all of it. The very things that make exploitation possible in the first place. And instead, to see one fundamental, shared humanity.
And this really gets us to the ultimate goal. It's not just about economic security. The real aim is the balanced, holistic growth of every single person, developing our physical, our mental, and our spiritual sides all in harmony. In this view, a truly healthy society has to nurture all 3.
So we end up back where we started, but with a much bigger picture. This whole philosophy, PROUT and neo-humanism, it offers a vision where progress isn't just measured by money, but by the physical, mental, and spiritual health of all creation. Which leaves us with a final question to really think about. What would a world that was actually built on that principle truly look like?